My name is Gianni Russo, a.k.a. Carlo, the infamous son-in-law from The Godfather. I'm now known as the Hollywood Godfather, and this is my story.
Before all of the wins in my portfolio, I was a little boy diagnosed with polio. Experimenting with cures, I tried every one. Felt everything in my right, but my left was numb. Walking with a limp, like will I ever run? Once again, or is this it? Am I forever done? Living in the hospital was never fun. Some people were cool, but not everyone. You never know who you're lying in a room with. So I broke a broomstick in half and let it groove with the concrete in the bathroom floor. It had a new tip.
Speak softly loud and hold me warm against your heart. I hear your words, the tender trembling moments. Welcome everybody. Another episode of Hollywood Godfather Podcast. And I have a very special guest tonight. This guy was in my background of my life during Kansas City in the 70s when I was dealing with the Teamsters to get a $72 million loan, not realizing he was part of the task force backing up the FBI. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and this should be an interesting show. This is a one-on-one with me and my new friend, Gary. Gary, welcome.
All right, Johnny, welcome. Thanks a lot for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. That is interesting how our lives paths crossed, and I didn't even know it, and you didn't either.
No, I mean, that's what's wild about the world in itself. It's so small, but with when I started reading and listening to some of your stuff, I was, at Mother's, I was hanging out in Kansas City during that time, which is wild. And you were in Kansas City most of your life, right?
Yeah, really, all my life.
And how long were you on the job?
25 years, 1971 till 1996.
Oh, wow.
I spent 25 years. I spent 13 years in the intelligence unit, which primarily worked on organized crime in Kansas City, a variety of other things. We worked on the Ku Klux Klan or any organization that might cause any kind of civil disorder during those days. And that all came kind of out of the 60s, and most of that went away by the time I left the intelligence unit. We didn't do any of that anymore. But so we ended up working on drug dealers at the end as a mafia kind of went on the down low. We worked on a lot of drug dealers.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's what happened. After organized crime, all you did was focus on drug dealers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We try to help with all the bigger guy. Whenever the feds would have a case or the DEA, we were kind of always the go-to people for the feds or the DEA when they needed the support and surveillance and those kinds of things. Why they always came to the intelligence unit, because all of our guys were specially vetted. You had to be cleaner than a hound's tooth, as they used to say. You had to be more virtuous than Caesar's wife in order to be in the intelligence unit. We worked directly under the chief's office, and we would handle a number of sensitive investigations for the chief of police too. So we kind of did those kinds of things.
That's great. And thank God you made it through. And did you ever get shot or anything?
No.
That's great.
I don't know. It's kind of a boring existence doing that kind of stuff. All we did was follow people around and find informants and do paper trails and take a look at LLCs and shell corporations and gather that kind of information, or maybe just go out and monitor a demonstration and write down some license plate numbers. And so I guess probably the most dangerous things we did were when we had a mob war going on, is following the two factions around, because their danger was not that they cared about us so much as that they thought we might be part of the other faction.
Oh, yeah, they could have taken you out.
Oh, yeah, we had a couple of incidents where they one time they chased me, and if I'd have just stopped and got out and got my badge out, once they saw I was the copper, they would have just said, okay.
Right.
But, they
who was that with? Can you
That was
mention
between the
names?
Sabellas and the Sparrows.
I was going to say, it had to be them.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. The Nick and Carl Corp Sabella, they were brothers, and then there was four Spiro brothers, Spero, and the Spiro brothers are kind of the Young Turks. This happened in other cities. It's like Danny Green, and he kind of wanted in Cleveland wanted to move up and move against the ruling people. Well, we had this set of brothers. They wanted to move up and move against the Sabellas, who they controlled the Teamsters in the city, and they controlled all the action really, and you couldn't do anything in that culture without kicking up to the Sabellas and.
Well, it's funny because I met Cork and Nick and them when I was like 17, 18, because I was
really?
traveling around for New York and Chicago trying to spread the word for JFK in the election when he was a senator, when they were getting all those votes. So I met all these people that many years ago. And before the election, and then obviously after the election, I was doing the same trip, but this time I didn't realize they were going to assassinate him. and Carlo Marcellos was emphatic at killing, and I thought he was going to kill Robert, actually, not John, because Robert embarrassed him to death at his house when they arrested him on that Sunday. But I was always fascinated at Kansas City because to me, being from New York and New Jersey and Philly and Chicago, you never really thought of Kansas City as being as powerful as they were. And I was shocked that they were running the Teamsters pension fund.
Really? Well, Nick Sabella, he's a pretty smart guy. He was not your regular mob boss. He was a cut above. He was a cut above everybody else here in Kansas City, and he was a cut above other mob bosses, I think, because he was considerate. He was kind on one hand, but yet he was ruthless on the other hand. He was well read. He didn't go out to the joints. Nick never went out and partied at any of the joints. He had one main girlfriend, as usual, which was way on the down low, and his wife. But matter of fact, he warned these other guys, he warned Court, we need to stay out of these joints, or you guys need to stay out of these joints. And he was that kind of guy. He read a lot. He just was thoughtful about it was a business, a real business to him. And he started developing his contacts with the Teamster. Now get this, he and Roy Lee Williams, who went on to become actually the one of the last mob controlled presidents of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. He developed him when both of them sat on a Democratic Party nominating committee here in Jackson County. They were a committee of people who were interested in members of the Democratic Party. And everybody in Jackson County, you had to be a Democrat to win anything in Jackson County.
Well, that was like so many major cities.
Yeah, oh yeah, all the big cities were just like this. And so, they sat on this nominating committee, and he got to know Roy Lee Williams, and, they kind of liked each other, it appears, and Sabella could be very charming. And he started off, kind of helping with, if they had a problem with an employer, Roy could come to Nick, and he could get some guys to go out and do some vandalism or do some things in order to soften up an employer that wasn't doing what the Teamsters wanted. And then in return, what Roy started doing with Nick was letting him get into, dictating who sold them like insurance policies.
Right.
Which on a bigger basis, they did that on a national basis too. Well, he started that.
Well, that's when they brought in Alan Dorfman. I remember that.
Right. See, I was in Chicago, but he's doing the same thing in Kansas City on a smaller level, just with the locals here. Like he had some crooked dentists, and they bought into a local kind of a dental policy. All the Teamsters guys had to kick in, and then it was Sabella, people who were dentists or connected to dentists that then were making the claims, and he was getting a piece of that. He was getting like $1 a van, I think, a month or something like that from the local Teamsters union. So he was smart. He wanted to get in those business crimes, not he let other people deal with the street people and deal with the boosters and the fencing and all that. He did not touch. You never saw him talking to any of those guys. His brother did that for him, and his underboss Tuffy DeLuda. They're the only ones, and another guy, Willie Tomasano, they're the only ones that dealt with anybody doing a real kind of crime that you could see was crime. So Nick was a bright guy, and slowly but surely over the years, he became known for that, and he was the kind of guy that could get stuff done.
Well, it was interesting because, as I said, I met him when I was 17, 18, when they finally got JFK nominated for the Democratic Party, and I stayed friends with him right up until I think he passed, because I got friendly with Butchie. Butchie moved to Vegas eventually.
He did. Kind of after, it seemed like it was after the Skim thing all fell. It's kind of hazy for me in there, but Butch Sabella, the what was he, the nephew of Nick's.
Right.
And he moved to Las Vegas, and that's the last I heard of him. Other than they said he was getting into some movie stuff out there and down in L.A. I know a guy that he got hold of, an FBI agent, and he got hold of him, sent word to him, wanted to know if he wanted to meet and talk about, doing some movie stuff about the Kansas City mob. And this FBI agent, he's kind of a hardcore and hard case. And he said, no, I don't want anything to do with it. So that's kind of the last I heard of Butch Sabella. You probably know more about that.
Oh, yeah. Thank God. I made a living doing that. I can't believe I made 46 motion pictures. It's crazy.
Really? Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Yeah, because I started out just being a runner and a gopher for Frank Costello when I was 13.
Wow.
He took me under his wing, and then, as you know, with those kind of guys, it takes time for them to trust you.
Yeah.
And over the years, I was living a dream because nobody could touch me. I was with all the top people.
That Frank Costello, you couldn't have fallen in with a better guy. I mean, he was like Nick Sabella. He was a businessman.
Exactly.
He knew how to make money. He didn't go in this bullshit of going out hitting the joints and having girlfriends and ripping people off. He was a businessman. He knew the money was in the poker machines or video poker or slot machines. Actually, he knew where that money was. And he reached out and made political contacts throughout the United States, and that you couldn't have fallen in with a better guy and learned the business from a better guy.
Oh yeah, and then he introduced me to Maya Lansky, then Maya introduced me to Tony Accardo, and then Nick. I met all the gentlemen of the crime world.
Yeah.
And they made sure that nobody knew who I was. That's why they called me the Kid. It wasn't until I made the motion picture that people realized who I was. It's very funny, but
they were smart. They didn't even use your name in your real name in conversation or on the phone or anything. They just referred their FBI agents ran around and go, "Who's this, the Kid?"
Well, I know it's crazy.
See him now.
No, it's. But it was such an experience. And then when I read about you, and I'm saying, wait a minute. Because I remember, everybody was talking about, well, they didn't know the code name Strawman, but they know the heat was on. And, and Frank Fitzsimmons didn't help any of that at the time either. But
no.
What did you know about Hoffa, finding God and all that? You must have been all over that.
Well, not really Hoffa. Chucky O'Brien, his stepson, was here in Kansas City quite a little bit. His mother lived here, and family here. But they were like these kind of characters that they weren't down in the North End. They weren't over by the social club, the Northview Social Club,
right.
And then what we call the North End or Little Italy. They weren't seen among those people. So to us, on the street level, they were kind of like some other characters. Now we knew about meetings that Nick was having with some of these other Teamsters, and we tried to monitor them if they came into town. I remember, Alan Dorfman and Joe Lombardo came down here once, but they didn't leave a hotel room. They flew in the airport and stayed in the airport hotel room. Nick went in the hotel room there and met with them in there, and then left again.
Right.
And it all happened so fast, the Bureau couldn't get any
Wires
electronic
set up.
surveillance set up. So,
No, I mean, you have
we
an
knew
I mean,
sometimes they,
it's funny because here we are talking from both sides of the track, and thank God we're here. I never
Really,
did a day in time. I never had handcuffs on, and they tried
really?
so many times, man. But and that's why I felt it. That's why I sent you that wiretap.
yeah, that was really interesting. That they kind of had you pegged. You didn't have any money.
No,
I
I
was
mean
laughing. I tell you, I read that and I thought that Tuffy DeLuna, that guy, instinctually he knows, what's what, and they, they were talking with Augusto. I listened to many of those conversations between him and Augusto, and the Augusto will be blowing on about, he knows this, he knows that. And you could tell Tuffy was like taking everything with a grain of salt. He was a cagey dude.
Oh yeah.
Then we had other audio of him talking to Nick Savella about the things that Joe Augusto had said. And Tuffy would warn him, say, now, Joe kind of likes to go on and on a little bit. So, let's be careful here before we go any further, because they were talking a lot about paying off politicians or making contributions out there in Las Vegas and on a state level too. The
I know.
governorship,
It was. I mean,
that.
it was said that they had Senator Reid out there.
That's what they say. Now, here's the theory on that. And listen to a lot of those wiretaps, and they do. Joe Augusto does talk about having a guy named Jay Brown. They called him Channel. Jay Brown was you may remember him. He was a law partner of Harry Reid's when he had a small law office.
Yep.
And they also talked about, Augusto indicated that he was getting information from Cleanface. And they finally figured out that Cleanface was Reid. Now, you couldn't really, there was no smoking gun in there at all.
Right.
Nothing that was really like, and they called Jay Brown Channel. I always felt like that Jay Brown was like talking to Reid, because they were talking about Lefty and what they were going to do with Lefty and how they were going to deal with him, and that Lefty was trying to discredit Harry Reid, and they didn't really want Lefty Rosenthal to try to discredit Harry Reid because they didn't want him exposed.
Well, and they didn't really let Lefty in on a lot of things. I mean, he was a genius odds maker, and that's what they were just wanted to capitalize on that. But they were not about to tell him that Harry Reid is with them. Be quiet.
Right. And he was frantically trying to discredit and embarrass Harry Reid in order for him to stay in the casino. Nick Savella, even, he called, what's his name? The lawyer out there.
Oscar Goodman.
Oscar Goodman. He called Oscar Goodman. I got a copy of that tape. He called him and kind of was, you could tell he was like asking about Lefty. And Oscar Goodman was real cagey. He didn't really answer him back directly. He said, he gets offended. He's his own man, and he gets offended. And Nick was saying, well, I'd like to get a message to him. And Oscar saying, well, I don't know. I hardly ever see him. And, if I say, it's kind of like everything was real amorphous. Finally, Nick does get a phone call in directly to Lefty, and basically, and I don't have the audio, I've only got the transcript, and he basically says, cool it, man, you got to cool it and knock this off. And Lefty says he will, and which means that he'll quit going after Harry Reid, which means he'll drop his battle with the gaming commission, which means he has to leave the Stardust, is what that means.
Well, no, what they first did with him, I don't know if you remember that. Well, you weren't there, so maybe you don't know. They made him the entertainment director for a while.
Right.
And to put him at a lower level. And then when they opened that big sports book for him, that's when they gave him the TV show, and Sinatra. He started to line himself up as a celebrity to take the pressure off, because he was making so much money on laying the odds throughout the country. Nobody knew that. That was crazy. It's like,
He was. And they loved him in Chicago for that. That's
Oh
where
my
it came
God.
from.
Ocado
He
loved
could.
him. I mean, we all know that Sam Giancana was the front for Ocado. Ocado was the brains of Chicago forever, till he died. I used to go see Tony even in Palm Springs when he moved there. And we all had a problem with Tony Spilatro. It was insane.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's a good question. That's one I have for you. Is what was that like for you out there? Now I hear on the wiretaps, Nick or Tuffy DeLuna is, for example, telling Joe Augusto that even in one conversation he talked about stealing from the Tropicana.
Right.
He said even if they're a friend of Little T's, and that's how I referred to Spilatro as Little T. Even if they're a friend of Little T's, you fire them. We can't have that in the Tropicana. So how did you navigate around Spilatro? Because he really ran a lot of stuff and wanted to run everything.
Well, see, he never realized my relationship with Chicago, because we want nobody to know what my relationship was. That's why even DeLuna, he said I had no money. I had all the Vatican skim money that I made for 16 years with Nick Nitti. But I couldn't bring it in. How could I spend it? Couldn't show it.
No, you couldn't.
See, but Nick knew. See, I had a private meeting with Nick in Kansas City saying, I have whatever you put up backed, and I can prove that to you, only you. Because that's how smart Frank Costello was. He said, only talk to Nick and Tony Accardo about what you want to do. Only talk to them. Eyeball to eyeball. That's why I was going there. So Nick couldn't even tell DeLuna that, hold on, I know the kid's got backing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's why he said he's good. They were trying to tell him to be quiet, please. We know what we're doing. But the greatest thing for me, obviously, listen to the wiretap, because that Ned Day was such an idiot. He should have never disclosed that wiretap, because that's what tipped me off not to draw down the money.
Yeah, really.
If I would have drew down the money, I would have got convicted.
I wonder how he got that wiretap, because wiretap information under Title III, I mean, they'll leak it out to reporters. Some bureau agent had to leak it out, because otherwise it's totally secretive until it's exposed in court. Once they enter it as evidence, then it can be given out. Otherwise, it's like violation of the grand jury. You can be charged with a crime for giving out wiretap information.
Well, Ned Day was like a cockroach. He was around everybody that meant something. And I guess somebody gave him this, not realizing he was going to put it in the paper.
Man, I tell you what, that agent, he must have really either owed him a big favor, or he must have really wanted to take care of him, or he wanted to burn you. I don't know which.
I think it's all of them, all the above. People hated me because they figured, this guy's in his 30s. He's driving around with Bentleys and Ferraris. I locked up that 23 acres on that corner, and it was all smoke and mirror. But, all of it was done through a corporation out of Monaco that you can never trace. Nobody can get anything out of Monaco. That's why I went over there. I was good friends with Grace Kelly. So they gave me a municipal. I wasn't worried, because in Monaco, they have to own 51% of the corporation. So, but I knew you could never penetrate the veil of that corporation.
Yeah.
So I transferred the land there, and I used that as my backing for anything I wanted to do, because the value of that land was insane.
Oh, yeah.
And Nick knew that. But again, the only reason even Nick would meet me, because I met him when I was a teenager. Now, 15, 16 years went by, and he knew I was still in the good graces of the people he even respected. That's why when I read your record, I said, we got to talk, because you were on the other side, on the inside of it, which is very few people know that. You know that.
Yeah. Kind of interesting is you're kind of like Joe Augusto. If you'd have continued in the relationship with Nick, see, Joe Augusto was a guy that nobody ever heard of. Like, where did this guy come from?
Right.
He was originally from Sicily, but nobody ever really figured out who he was. Even the bureau, even after he turned witness on him and he became a cooperating witness, and they had him under protection to testify against Sabella and them. Nobody still knew exactly where he came from, and they think he came from Sicily, got somebody else's name, and he'd done a couple of scams. One of them was even up in Alaska, and he did a little short bit for check kiting, I think, because he was a real good check kiter. And he came out of nowhere. So you're one of those same kind of guys that just came out of nowhere and would be hooked up with Sabella. He liked that.
Right. I'm going to just do a fast commercial a minute. We got to make some money to keep this show on the air. And I want all of my audience to know that we now have Corleone Fine Italian Food online. We have gift boxes right now that for the celebration of the 50th anniversary of The Godfather. So I'd take advantage of it if I were you. We ship anywhere in the world. We're in 73 countries. And God bless The Godfather movie, because it's the gift that never stops giving to me. It's 50 years now. Today's show is being sponsored by Corleone Fine Italian Food Products. This sponsor really means a lot to me. Corleone Fine Italian has taken the heart and soul of the Godfather films and created a line of food products that include pasta sauce, balsamic vinegar from Modena, Italy, Genco extra virgin olive oil from Sicily. They created delicious pasta, tomato basil, arrabbiato, and my favorite, Clemenza's meat sauce. You will be amazed. You will think your grandmother made the sauce herself. CorleoneFineItalian.com. That's CorleoneFineItalian.com. Well, I want to go back to my guest because this is so interesting. I mean, to me, to have you on, and I mean, we could talk for days, but the history that both of us know, and like you just told about Joe Augusto. Joe Augusto was like, nobody knew who he was at the Tropicana. It was like insane.
Yeah. Well, he ran the Lido show.
I know. And he knew nothing about that.
On the papers, but you know, he didn't know anything about dancers.
No.
He knew nothing about music or dancers or anything, but on paper he ran the Lido show.
And that's why he kept Rob Lee there, because Rob Lee was the guy running the Lido show.
Okay, I always wondered who ran the Lido show.
No, Rob Lee was there. They put him in just like, I guess they got the idea, well, if they could put, you know, Lefty Rosenthal the head of a show, put Joe Augusto, get him licensed that way.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to him, I had a club. When he got there, I had a club at the Tropicana Hotel that Costello, because Costello had a piece of that yet.
Yeah, I remember going way back.
Yeah. And so he introduced me to the right people. And I can't even remember how I remember the casino boss was Nick Tano at the time.
Oh, was he? Yeah, I remember the name Nick Tano.
Yeah, and Nick Tano was a big fan of mine from The Godfather.
Uh-huh.
So I opened this club, and with, you know, my friends and people in high places, they got Elvis to open it for 3 nights after he was done at the International Hotel. He had come there because I opened at 12 at midnight to 6 in the morning, only 3 days a week. But I made more money because everybody we had was supporting it. I mean, even what's the name, who owned all the cabs there. So all the dispatches, they'd stay on. You got in a cab, wanted to go someplace else. They said, oh, you should go to Tiffany's. Elvis is over there tonight at the Tropicana. So,
cool.
You know, it's great. But Joe Augusto, if you know, it's a lot of those guys, if it ain't about them, and he was that kind of egotistical guy. You know, he was picking on showgirls, and I'm saying, oh, this guy ain't gonna last long. But it's funny. When here we are sitting and talking about it, and they're all gone. It's like insane.
Really.
But you know,
he brought one of those showgirls with him into witness protection when they were hiding him out here in Kansas City. Some FBI agents, friends of mine, had to go babysit with him when they were getting ready for the first Kim trial in the Tropicana. And he died, about the end of that trial. He died before the next trial for the Chicago guys. But they said he had this beautiful redhead gal who had been a show gal out there for him.
Oh, yeah.
And they said he could cook. He said they loved doing this duty because he had that gal there. Plus, he could cook like nobody's business.
Oh, yeah, it was good. Well, all Italians think they could cook and make love. You know that.
Yeah, that's true.
No, but
I have noticed that.
So what did you think of that Butchie and them? Because that's basically you on the job there. You see all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
On the North
Sure.
End.
I remember Butch could really run a club. He had a.
Oh, Mothers. That was a great club.
And Mothers. He had another one called Diana's. He had.
Well, Diana was after his girlfriend.
I wasn't. Oh, I didn't really realize that.
Yeah.
But he could really run a good club, and it was felt safe, and people, they really.
Well, I knew they respected the Savellas. Hello.
Yeah, oh yeah. Everybody kind of knew, and the ones that didn't got learned real quick. They learned real quick who was who. And I remember going up there to Mothers out there at 51st and Main. Court came in late at night. He's dancing with all these young girls.
Oh, he loved it.
He was probably younger than I am now, but he seemed like an old man at the time. He was whooping it up. He had a good time that night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, Nick used to tell him, "What are you guys doing? Were you crazy? What are you down there for?"
He did not think they needed about in those joints.
No. I remember I was invited for a Thanksgiving. That's how close I got to them. I went to their house for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I really felt good about my relationships with all those major guys, like Accardo.
Yeah.
I never liked Sam Giancana, and then when the ad came in, Spilotro, I said, "What the hell are they doing here? Why'd they send this guy here?" And he destroyed it.
Yeah.
In the 3 or 4 years that he was there, he really took down the city. And then he created that crazy gang, the Hole in the Wall gang, with, that group with, I couldn't understand the amount of money that was being taken out of there for years. And I watched a lot of it and took a lot of duffel bags out on the Nitty Travel in Chicago. We'd leave every Monday with bags of money. Yeah. And this was easy, I said. And I actually, the lawyer, Sidney Korshak, they hired him as my attorney. I retained him.
Oh, really?
And he got me a Corey's license. So I'd go to McCarran Field, and if they stopped me, I'd show them my license. I can't show you what's in the bag. I got a license bond on this. And I had them so frustrated for a long time. But it was, it was funny because, I knew what I was doing, obviously. Yeah. And it was a crazy, crazy time. But
that's I had conversations.
Oh, my God,
When Nick talked about this, getting that skim back from the Trop. See, the Trop was a separate stream of skim from the Stardust. That was Nick's. Nick, the only one that he developed that all on his own. He did not have to give Chicago anything.
And nobody touched it.
That's right. All by himself.
That's like the Dunes.
He did give Iopa some piece of it, but he was just being smart there. By giving
like an insurance policy. Well, they did the same thing with the Riviera Hotel. I remember that because some piece of that was going to the Purple Gang in Detroit.
Yeah, that was Detroit.
And they knew what they were doing. And then even with the Jewish guy that was fronting the Dunes, that was New England.
What was that guy's name? He's from St. Louis.
Yep. But
I can't think of his name all of a sudden.
They knew what they were doing. The only big problem I ever saw was when what's her name came in, Sarkis Webby came in to run the Aladdin, and he brought all kinds of heat from St. Louis. So it was like because
that's who I'm thinking of, not Webby, but the lawyer from St. Louis, because I got a conversation.
Yeah, he was a lawyer. But it wasn't not Sarkis, but the other guy,
he owed he was Webby's partner in the Aladdin.
Right.
He owed. They got some money from Dorfman, or
Yep.
from actually started with Hoffa, according to this guy.
Yep.
And Dorfman was called him up from his office, and Joey Lombardo was sitting there, and he was saying, you owe me some money here, and this St. Louis lawyer said, I did my deal with Hoffa. I didn't do anything with you, and Dorfman says, well, got some other people that came in on this. He said, I don't have a deal with them. Well, then Lombardo gets on the phone and he said, hey, he said, you may not know me, but I got something to say to you. And he said, you say you're 73. Said, if you want to hit 74, then you're going to have to do the right thing by Alan here. He said, now Alan is not that kind of guy. Alan's not going to do anything, but the people that got a piece of Alan, they are that kind of guy.
Right.
So,
and look at
it was a
that.
classic.
Look at the demise Alan had. Oh my God.
Yeah, really.
What a tough death that was.
Yeah, I know. That's you're gonna get popped with Joey Lombardo, and people are already starting to turn. Why you better?
Oh, I know.
You better
man.
start watching your back, because
See that
they'd
was
already
another.
set a bomb under his car once, like a year or so before that.
Oh, I know.
Something.
But the interesting thing is that's why I was so happy I had the relationship I had with the smart guys, because a lot of times my name came up, even like you would know, interpreting that wiretap I got caught on. Nick was basically protecting me. Well, he's coming in with a friend of ours, and he was trying to let him to stop talking. Don't worry, I know what I got to do here. But, DeLuna was just a loudmouth. He hated me. Because I remember one night they all walked into jubilation when Paul Anka first opened that club. And I kept this booth. Every night I kept the booth. And if I didn't show up, I'd pay like $500 if I didn't show up. And they wanted that booth because they knew it was mine. He says, well, and it was Andy, what's her name's father, said, I can't give it to you. He comes here every night. And that's what pissed a lot of them off, even Spilatro, because they were trying to say, who is this kid?
Yeah.
Which got them crazy. But fortunately, I'm still here and they're not.
Yeah, that's true.
So what were some of the highlights of like major stuff that you saw there, now that it's all behind you?
Oh, I don't know. It was kind of a blurred away right now, but I would guess. See, we had this mob war going on, and that's what I ended up right in the middle of that mob war, and it got crazy here for a while. I mean, it was unbelievable. We had started off with one murder of the oldest Spiro brother, and then Nick Spiro, or Nick Savella, being the guy that he is, he puts out the word that this other guy who didn't kill Nick Spiro, he's the one that did the killing. Then they killed him, trying to deflect, any attention.
Let some pressure off.
From the Spiro younger brothers. But the youngest brother, Carl Spiro, had just gotten out of the penitentiary from the jewelry robbery he'd done several years before. And he was a pretty major thief, national. He would travel around and do really big jewelry scores. And he had two other brothers that were kind of like, they were basically teamsters is what they were. They worked the docks. One of them had become a business agent and had always worked the docks. But he got his brothers together, and they started this war with the Savellas, like you couldn't believe. We got a wiretap Nick and Court talking about, how do we get this guy? He moved out in the country, this youngest Spiro brother. He moved out in the country to they had little hobby farms, and he lived up on a hill with about 10 acres around him. And you couldn't get within a half a mile of this house without being seen.
Wow.
And they were talking about that, how we can't do anything out there. And they said, we'd have to get somebody that could go through the fields, run up through the fields to get to his house. And our guys aren't in shape for that.
And you had all that on tape.
Yeah, yeah.
But how did the
So
Spiro brothers recruit anybody against the Savellas?
well, it's a
Did
good
they get them out
question.
of town? From out of town?
Well, this Carl Spiro was a real well liked guy in that professional criminal world between the mob guys and the Square John people. Like Henry Hill is a good example of that kind of a guy. He's a professional criminal. He was raised in and around mob guys. He's never done anything but be a thief. And so Carl Spiro was Italian, but he was one of those guys, and he started recruiting among those other guys, saying, hey, come with me and we'll move in on these Savellas and we'll get some of that action that they've got. Like they wanted to move in on the Teamsters, and he had a couple of relatives already working for the Teamsters, and one of them was a business agent, and Savellas were keeping that Spiro brother, tamped down, and Teamsters like these guys. And so you're kind of your rank and file person out there in that world like these Spiro brothers. And there's a lot of jealousy about the Savellas.
Oh,
so
yeah.
he started recruiting. And I even talked to people. They told him that's exactly what he told me. This was a Peckerwood or a non-Italian who had a basement building business, but was kind of a quasi-criminal himself, wanted to be. And I got an in with him. And he told me, he said, yeah, I said, Carl said, come, we're going after those Savellas. We're going to do something here. I'm putting together a crew. And if I could find it out, the Savellas have found out that he was going around saying that kind of stuff by then. Well, then the bombs started and the murders started about that time. They caught all three Spiro brothers in one tavern one night. And they, we were out we knew this was going on. Two of our guys had just driven by the tavern and they saw Carl Spiro was on the phone and just inside the front door. They drove on down the road a ways and they hear a call come out that there's been shots fired at the Virginia Tavern. So they turn around and go back, and there's Carl Spiro laying out in the middle of the street. Well, just as these guys were driving by, probably three other guys in ski masks came in the back door, and two of them went right to the Joe and Mike Spiro and started shooting them up. And Carl Spiro was up by the front door on the payphone, and he ran out the front door. They ran out the front door and popped him with a shotgun as he crossed the street. And so it killed one of them and wounded the other one inside, and Carl Spiro was wounded, but he was paralyzed from the waist down, but he never slowed down. After he came back
Really?
from healing up, he never slowed down. He kept after those Savellas the whole time. And
wow, how the hell? I mean, why did he think he could beat them? Look, I mean, Jesus.
I don't know. Hubris, his reach exceeded his grasp.
Yeah, I mean,
something I've been accused of. My reach often exceeds my grasp. His reach exceeded his grasp. See, he had no idea at his level about the Teamsters, about the money coming from the casinos, how much influence Nick Savella had on a national basis over the Teamsters,
and respected throughout the world.
And respected, yeah. They would call him Mr. Savella in Chicago and Milwaukee and Cleveland. So yeah, he was really respected. And
I remember even as a kid, the only people that had that kind of respect was Costello, Accardo, Nick Savella.
Yeah.
Very few people. And
that's because they were quiet money makers.
Right, and big money makers. And they didn't play games. Very quietly, they'll take care of you.
Yeah. And I think another thing people don't really realize is Nick was an integral part of the relationship with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
Oh, yeah.
And back east, they don't, in New York, the five families, they don't think so much about it because that's a whole different game. But out here in the Midwest and the rest of the United States,
oh, that's huge.
When you control
that kind of membership, you control elections. And so that's the whole thing.
Right. And with a union, you just go to one guy and say, tell all your guys to vote for Robert Kennedy. tell all your guys nationwide to vote for, whatever. Tell all your guys in Chicago and Illinois to vote for Jim Thompson as governor. You
Well,
tell all your guys.
I could tell you, Chicago had the culinary union and the Teamsters. Marcellus,
They did, didn't they?
Marcellus had the International Longshoremen along with the Anastasias in New York. You're talking about
Right.
membership bodies that could swing an election.
Right.
And that's all. I
And
learned all of that as a kid, just running around, wondering why I was sending all these messages. And then I realized when the nomination came out, he was in.
Yeah. See, you were part of that on your level. You were a big part of that, and a lot of your normal like mob fans, if you will, people that look at the mob are entertained by the mob. They don't really. That stuff wasn't so fun. It's not so fun because it's a lot of boring paperwork. It's a lot of elections and transfer of amounts of cash to people, and everybody is quiet about it. And God, to have those unions gives you political power, and also those unions can then turn around and donate money to different politicians, and judges run for election too, and so in many states. So they then go back, they donate their money, which the mob tells them, you go donate money to this guy, and then you own that guy.
And that was the education I got without them knowing I was really absorbing it. They knew.
Yeah.
And my loyalty to Costello for the first 3 or 4 years, then they said, I got the guy. This is the kid. He'd be taking care of this. But I learned, and then even late at night when I was hanging out at the Copa room, because every Saturday I'd wind up at the Sands Hotel, especially when the Rat Pack was there, because they wanted him to babysit JFK, and JFK wanted all the broads and Peter Lawford. So I got in the end of that, and I was like 18 years old. It was crazy.
Really?
But I mean,
Talk about a witness.
and like you're saying, it wasn't the street glorified and hanging around with those 5-inch collars with a bunch of bimbos in nightclubs.
Yeah, no.
I was nowhere, and nobody knew what I was doing. I was glad, because here I am now. And that's why a lot of people, when they read my book, they say, oh, come on, this is all malarkey, it's all bullshit. Because nobody knew what I was doing. And even Spilotro didn't know what I was doing. Because he was wondering, how could this guy have all this power here? What does he do?
Yeah.
And nobody could tell him. Because they didn't know. That's what it was. A handful of people knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
And that's what kept me alive, basically.
Yeah.
No, it's what a pleasure having you on, though. I could talk to you for days, though. It's so the knowledge you have, and it's a world that there's very few people I could sit and talk to, because who knows that world when you think about it.
Yeah.
The people on the other side are all dead. Nick's dead. Everybody's dead. But to have someone like you with your knowledge, I really consider this a privilege, and I hope we could do this again. Believe me.
Oh yeah, sure, anytime.
And the 50 minutes just flew by, as we knew it would.
Oh, is it gone by? All right, yeah, that was cool. All right.
Yeah. So I want to thank you again, and we'll send you a copy and share it with your people and podcast. What's your podcast? Let my people know.
It's Gangland Wire.
Gangland Wire. Oh, that's a good one.
Gangland Wire. Yeah. Well, YouTube and the audio podcast. All the podcast apps, and I'm on YouTube too. I didn't used to, and I changed up, and I decided to do with these Zoom calls. I got some videos, so I've been putting everything on YouTube also.
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Well, my technician Mike will get you everything.
Okay.
We may call you again. Pat is so disappointed because he couldn't be on the call, but
let's do it again.
He got hit with that COVID over the weekend.
I feel his pain. I got hit with it last week myself, and it just got over it.
It's the second time. So with that said,
mine's the second time too. I've got 3 shots and 2 bouts of COVID.
I know, it's
never
crazy.
Get it again.
But he had so many questions, and he's so envious of me at this point.
Well,
but I really appreciate
when he gets back to work. When he gets back to work, let's do this again.
Oh yeah, please. Thank you so much. God bless you. And
all right, Johnny.
Again, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, to all my listeners, we know we're not doing a mailbag because I was not going to interrupt this conversation. And we'll be back next week, as usual, with the crew. Stay tuned. Give us the interviews, give us the reviews, and tell your friends. God bless you all. Thank you. Woo!
If you're feeling sad and lonely, there's a service I could render. I'm the one who loves you only. I could be so warm, so tender. Call me. Don't be afraid, you can call me. Maybe it's late, but just
Thank you for tuning in to the Hollywood Godfather podcast. You can contact Gianni Russo, Patrick Picciarelli, or myself, Megan Horan, with your questions and comments through the contact section of our website, HollywoodGodfatherPodcast.com, which is where you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter. You can also call and leave us a message at 646-776-3038. Remember to follow us on Instagram at Hollywood Godfather and on Facebook, as well as leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd like to know what you'd like about what we're doing, what you'd like to hear in the future, and anything else you might suggest to improve our podcast. Most importantly, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back next week with stories of the mob and Hollywood, as well as answers to your messages. Good night.
Call me. Don't be afraid, you can call me. Maybe it's late, but just call me. Tell me and I'll be around. I'll be around. Give me a call.
When I was 17, it was a very good year. It was a very good year for small town girls and soft summer nights. We'd hide from the lights on the village green. When I was 17.
More than this, I did it my